Most people think the hardest part of the LSAT is the logical reasoning section, but reading comprehension is the real silent killer. It looks harmless because you've been reading your whole life, but on the LSAT, it's a trap. If you've ever read an entire passage and realized that you remember nothing, if you've ever guessed on 5 questions in a row because they all sounded kind of right, you're not alone. And no, the solution is not to do 50 more passages and hope something clicks. That is a complete waste of time. The reading comp section, though, is completely beatable once you change how you approach it. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how. The reason smart students bomb reading comp isn't because they can't read, it's because they're using the wrong mental model. They read LSAT passages the same way they read for school. Slowly, carefully, trying to absorb every single detail. And that is exactly how the LSAT beats you. LSAT reading comp is not about memorizing facts. It is about detecting structure. It's asking, can you tell what the author's really trying to do? Can you tell who's arguing with who? Can you quickly ignore what does not matter? But if you treat reading comp like a history quiz, you're going to lose. So I want to invite you to reframe how you read. The author is not a teacher giving a lecture. They are a lawyer making a case. Every reading comp passage is an argument or multiple arguments. Not a textbook, not a Wikipedia article, but an argument. That means the author is trying to persuade you, subtly, strategically, through their tone and the structure of their passage. And your job is to read like the opposing counsel. You're not there to admire their writing, you're there to test it. You want to ask yourself, what's their claim? What's their evidence? And what is the weakest link in their logic? And when we work with students, that one shift, seeing the passage as a legal argument, completely changes how our students read. You stop passively absorbing information and you start analyzing it. Now, every paragraph on the LSAT has a job, and your job is to find out what that job is. You want to look out for signal words because they're clues to the flow of the argument. If you see, for example, some researchers believe, you're hearing one side of a debate. If you see however or critics argue, that is the counterpoint. If you see therefore, this suggests or clearly, that's probably the author stepping in with their own view. And those are your road signs. They tell you where the argument turns. And almost every passage has the same 3 characters: scholar A, scholar B, and the author. Scholar A says one thing, then scholar B disagrees, they add nuance, or they offer a new theory. And then the author either sides with one, with both, or with neither of them. And your goal is not to memorize names or terms. Your goal is to map out who believes what. Once you can see who's on which side, you can stop rereading and start predicting what's coming next. Now, here is the key mindset I want to invite you to adopt when it comes to reading comp. You are not reading to remember, you are reading to label. Every paragraph gets one label. It's either background, it's viewpoint A, it's viewpoint B, it's the author's opinion, or it contains evidence or examples. That is it. You are building a mental map so that when you hit the questions, you already know where everything is located. Now, there are a lot of people who will say that skimming is lazy, but that's a myth. Strategic skimming is actually essential. High scorers skim on purpose, not to read less, but to focus their attention better. Here's how exactly to go about it. You read the first paragraph carefully because that's your setup. It tells you the topic, the debate, and the tone of the passage. Then for the middle paragraphs, you read just the first 1 or 2 sentences, then you stop and you ask, what is this doing? Is it a new theory or criticism? If so, you slow down. Is it more examples or elaboration? If so, you note it and you move on. Then in the final paragraph, you're looking for the author's conclusion or resolution. You're training your brain to notice structure over surface level topic. Now, here is the simplest and most powerful tool I teach. It's called the passage skeleton. It is a simple 10-second outline you build while you read. No full sentences, no notes, just shorthand. For example, background, old theory, new theory, or the author supports the new theory. That could be your skeleton. That is the flow of the passage. Again, background or context, old previous theory, new theory that contains an update, and then the author expressing their opinion, in this case, supporting the new theory. That is it. That is your skeleton. Now, this way, when a question asks specifically about the third paragraph, you know exactly where to look, no need to panic. And you're not memorizing anything, you're just mapping it out, and that is the game here. Now, the reason the skeleton approach works is because your working memory is limited. You can only hold about 4 to 7 chunks of information at a time. But when you try to remember every fact, you're overloading your brain, pushing beyond the limits of working memory. And so, of course, it's only natural that you're going to lose things. But when you compress the passage into only 4 labeled chunks, you're basically giving yourself a GPS for the passage. And that way, you're not wasting energy rereading or panicking. You're not forgetting the main idea, and you're not drowning yourself in all the details. Now, here's something almost every student asks me. What if I don't understand the topic? Now, the good news is that does not matter. You don't need to know everything about ant colonies, ancient pottery, or constitutional theory. You've just got to follow the structure of the argument. Who said what? What's their stance? And what's the author doing with it? That is it. Structure, not subject. Now, every reading comp question falls into one of 5 major categories. And once you learn them, you'll know exactly what to look for. First, we've got main point and primary purpose questions. These are asking you, what's the big picture? The right answer captures the whole argument, and the wrong ones zoom in a bit too narrowly or they exaggerate the tone. Which brings us to the second type, the author's attitude or tone. This is asking you how the author feels. You want to look for subtle adjectives like unfortunately, problematic, or elegant. The LSAT makers love academic restraint. They're never getting too extreme with their emotions. They're moderate. Third category is specific detail questions, asking you, what does the passage say in this exact line? I want you to always go back and reread that section because your memory is unreliable and context is everything. Then fourth, we have function and purpose questions asking us, why did the author include this? What role does this play? Similar to logical reasoning. So you want to ask yourself what the paragraph or the sentence does in the argument overall. Does it introduce something new? Does it contrast? Does it support? Or does it draw a conclusion? Then finally, we have inference questions asking you what is implied but not said directly. And here you want to be careful to stay close to the text. If the answer feels like a big leap, it's wrong. Now, there are 3 traps you should be knocking out immediately, instantly, eliminating wrong answers. The first big trap is extreme language. Words like always, never, only, or completely. Again, the LSAT loves restraint. They love to hedge. They don't really talk in absolutes very often. Then the second trap is half-truths, where the first half sounds great, but the second half of the choice will twist or kind of overstate things. Then finally, the third trap is bringing in outside knowledge, which might sound logical, true, or accurate in real life, but it was never stated in the passage itself. If it's not in the text, it's trash, you knock it out. You want to train yourself to say why each wrong answer is wrong during your review process. For example, it's too extreme, it adds information, it flips the author's opinion. Now let's talk about timing. You've got 35 minutes for 4 passages, roughly 9 minutes each. I want you to split it like this. You spend roughly 3 minutes reading and mapping, and you spend 6 minutes answering the questions. That is it. You don't need to read faster. You've just got to stop wasting time on the wrong things. If you hit a hard question and you're stuck after 90 seconds, flag it, move on, and come back later. Most questions are standalone and independent. You can easily come back at the end of the passage. Now, if you've got to reread, it's okay, but you want to do it smart. You don't reread the whole paragraph. You go back 2 lines above the referenced point and 2 lines below. You paraphrase what you read in your own words. Then you look at the answers and you match your paraphrase. And if nothing matches, it probably means you misunderstood the scope. So you've got to recheck the author's stance and their tone. And that alone will save several minutes and your energy. So let's talk about summarizing. Before you look at a single question, you stop and you say out loud, the author mainly argues that X, contrasting A and B, and they favor Y because Z. That is your skeleton. That is your summary. If you can't do that in just 10 seconds, your skeleton is not clear enough. You glance back, you refine it, and you move on. Now, here's how to build skills. You do a skeleton drill where you read a passage and you build a 4-line skeleton, maybe one sentence for each paragraph. A function drill could be identifying what each paragraph does in just 5 words or less. An elimination drill could be, for every wrong answer, you label the flaw, the problem, the trap. Is it extreme? Is it a half-truth? Is it pulling in outside information? And a timing drill could be where you cap yourself at that 3-minute limit for reading the passage, no matter what, so that you'll have enough time to solve the questions later that were associated. Now remember, reading comp is rewarding structure. You don't have to love reading. You don't even need to be fast, but you do need to be able to think strategically. That's how you transform yourself from passively reading to actively analyzing.